You're lucky. Watching live sports never used to be this easy. Running up and down that field looks tough.
It's a pitch.
Get way more into what you're into when you stream on the Xfinity 10G network.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Alongside EJ Smith, I'm Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from Arrowhead Stadium, gearing up for the Eagles Super Bowl rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs. EJ, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Olivia. You know, I packed this cardigan in my suitcase. It felt like I probably did it the day after the bye week started. You know, I knew our viewers would want it after I mentioned it last show, obviously. So brought it all the way to Kansas City just for the show.
EJ bringing the cozy fall vibes as we expected him to. We appreciate you going above and beyond with the wardrobe today. Before we get into our conversation, everybody, you know that you can be a part of our conversation. If you head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Gameday, you can leave us a question, a comment, truly whatever is on your mind. We want to hear from you, and we will answer some of your questions toward the end of our show today in a section we like to call the Fan Zone. The best zone. Before we get to that, let's talk about our health report for today and talking about some of the Eagles players that are expected to play today. One of them is right guard Cam Jurgens. He has missed the last 5 games with a foot injury. He was on injured reserve for quite some time. And finally, he is expected to play, and he's expected to be in the lineup today, starting at that right guard position. What could Jurgens' return to the lineup mean for this Eagles offensive line, EJ?
Yeah, I mean, so Sua Opeta did a decent job, you know, I think early on replacing Cam Jurgens and kind of struggled toward the end of his 4-game stretch. And then we saw Tyler Steen in that position for a game. And I thought he was up and down. I think what Cam Jurgens is going to offer this team is just stability at that position. You know, I think you've seen the run game struggle a little bit. And I think the Cam's absence is, a little bit to play there for sure. I mean, he was playing well before the injury. So I think just having somebody who you can trust at that spot is going to be big, down in and down out. It's going to be big tonight against Chris Jones, obviously. So, yeah, I definitely think it's a big boost for the offensive line, which has been struggling a little bit, based off of their lofty expectations that you always expect the Eagles offensive line to be able to, sustain a running game. We haven't seen quite that with the Eagles the last few weeks. So, yeah, Cam Jurgens will be a big boost for them for sure.
You mentioned Sua Opeta too. We just got the inactives list. He is inactive today, and that all that indicates now is that Tyler Steen is the second string, and we saw that this last game against the Dallas Cowboys when he got that starting gig for that one game. So just something to keep in mind. No other real surprises there. Defensive end Derek Barnett is out. He's inactive. He was essentially ruled out yesterday with dealing with a personal issue. So that's all we know about that. But those are 2 of the bigger names on the inactives list today. One of the other names that's actually quite big as well is tight end Dallas Goedert. He is out with a forearm fracture. That being said, he is not on injured reserve. And when we talked to head coach Nick Sirianni the other day, he said there's a reason that Goedert isn't on injured reserve right now. Perhaps he can be back in fewer than 4 games. We'll see. But what are the Eagles going to do in Goedert's absence, who is a big part not only in the passing game, but also in the run game as a run blocker?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the most important players on the team, not just because of the obvious, the production that he has in the passing game, but also just like the fact that he's such a, capable blocker in the run game and the versatility that he has at that position. The Eagles can run out of 11 personnel because Dallas Goedert can serve almost like a 6th offensive lineman in some situations. On the flip side, they can throw out of 12 personnel or 13 personnel because he's also kind of like a third receiver out there. So, losing him is a big loss for sure, just because it makes the Eagles a little bit more predictable offensively. They might have to go with heavier personnel groupings to run the ball, might have to go with lighter personnel groupings to get enough capable receivers on the field. So, all that said, the Eagles did pretty well without Dallas Goedert last year. They actually went 5-0 during the stretch that he was out. But it is also important to mention that they struggled in their first game without him. It was a game against the Indianapolis Colts. They won it 17-16, but it's kind of one of those games where the offense was struggling throughout the game, and they kind of caught on late. So I definitely think that it could be a factor tonight. This is a good Chiefs defense. We're going to talk about that later. And it's going to be a challenge for them, especially we've mentioned that they haven't been running the ball quite as well. Being without Dallas Goedert, that's definitely going to impact that. So I'm curious to see how they go about it. Last year, Quez Watkins became a bigger part of the passing offense, and Jack Stoll and Grant Calcaterra were bigger parts in the running game. And I think they did a good job kind of like offsetting, Goddard's ability, being just capable when they needed to block. So definitely there are avenues for the Eagles to kind of compensate for it, but I definitely think it's a huge loss considering how versatile and important Dallas Goedert is to the offense.
Speaking of Calcaterra, he is active today after he missed the week before the bye against the Cowboys with a concussion. So he'll be back in the lineup, and we'll see how much he is utilized in Goddard's absence. Another player that is back that's a pretty big boost potentially for the Eagles in their secondary is nickel cornerback Bradley Roby. We've talked about this quite extensively on our show over the last several weeks. The Eagles have been trying to figure out what to do exactly at that nickel position. Ever since Avonte Maddox went down, they've been trying to figure out a long-term position solution. They ultimately ended up signing Roby, and he only played 2 games before he was injured. So now he's back, and we'll see exactly how he is used. That said, what do you expect from him in terms of his snap count, coming off of such a long injury layoff?
Yeah, I think just having like a veteran presence will be good for that group. I think you've seen Kevin Byard kind of also give them, even if it's not like the most stellar play, at least it's like somebody who has seen a lot and isn't going to be surprised by things as much. But I am curious to see how they work him back in. That's been a huge problem for the Eagles defense is that slot cornerback spot. I think. I think just in general, we've seen Bradley Roby against like the Rams. You notice that he was kind of a big part of things, after those first 2 series. And I think you could see that. Again, the Eagles have really struggled against slot receiving targets, whether it was against Washington, who put Jahan Dotson in there and Logan Thomas in there, or against the Cowboys. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb had 11 catches. I think it was 191 yards against the Eagles. Now, that was against a lot of different people. Some of CeeDee Lamb's work was on the outside too against Darius Slay, but it's still a point of, I think it's going to be a point of emphasis for the defense moving forward, just because, I think teams are going to start really trying to pick on whoever's in the slot. So I think Bradley Roby will get tested early if he's in the game, or if it's whoever's in the slot, I think they're going to get tested early. I think it's going to be a deciding point of this game, obviously. Travis Kelce lines up in the slot a lot. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think Bradley Roby coming back, it's perfect timing because they probably need, they need options. Like you've seen Sean Desai throw a lot of different options at these types of players. It's not just one answer and let them sink or swim. It's a little bit of like, well, let's try this next series and let's try this the next series. So I think you'll see some Bradley Roby reps against Travis Kelce, and I think it's going to be important that somebody wins those reps. I don't know who it will be.
Let's talk about some other keys to this game for the Eagles. And as we already mentioned at the top of the show, it's the Super Bowl rematch. Obviously, everyone's been talking about it, and the marquee matchup, even though the 2 quarterbacks are not on the field at the same time as, maybe the cliche goes, Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, 2 very, very talented quarterbacks in the league and 2 of the best at it. The Kansas City offense, however, looks a little bit different this year than it did last year. Last year, you saw them in the Super Bowl. They were the top offense in the regular season in points and yards. This year, they're number 11 in points, number 8 in yards. They're dealing with a new offensive coordinator in Matt Nagy, some new receivers, new tackles. What is the key to limiting Kansas City's offense this year compared to last year?
Well, I think it really starts, as it always does, with pressuring Patrick Mahomes with 4-man rushes or 5-man rushes. You can't blitz a guy as talented as Patrick Mahomes and expect results. He's seen a lot of blitzes. He's smart. He's the type of quarterback that's going to make you pay if you send extra rushers. So that's definitely the number one thing, is being able to pressure him without sending extra rushers. And then the second part of it, the Chiefs receiving core, I think, is coming along. I think that they are starting to find some answers, but really the reason their offense has struggled a little bit more this year is because it's been a little bit more one-dimensional to Travis Kelce. I think, as we were just talking about, like the key is going to be limiting Kelce. The Eagles' middle field defense has been a problem all year. So it's going to be way easier for me to say that in the warm press box, looking out at the terrible elements, that they're about to play in. But no, I definitely think that those are the two keys on how you kind of slow this offense down. Andy Reid has a reputation. He's not, going to just stick with the run and constantly run right at you, although he did that in the Super Bowl in the second half. But still, I think that the key is going to be being able to affect Patrick Mahomes. You might not even get sacks because he's not he's not sack prone. He's so athletic. He's so good at maneuvering the pocket, but just affecting him, making him get the ball out, making him get off of his spot, and then having an answer for Travis Kelce. I think if you do those two things, you go a long way towards slowing down the Chiefs.
You talk about Kelce. He's even more of a part of this offense than he was last year. Last year, he had about 6.5 receptions per game. Now he's averaging about 7.1 receptions per game. He's averaging about 74.6 yards per game. From a personnel standpoint, how is defensive coordinator Sean Desai going to attempt to address Kelce? Is it as easy as just trying to double him constantly, or is he going to have to get a little bit more creative?
Yeah, I think it might just be like bracket coverages. I think they're going to, like, it's tricky with Kelce because you can't really go man against him. He's so big and athletic that you really can't trust one person to cover him one-on-one in man coverage. But you also can't really run zone against a guy that's smart and savvy. He's going to find the soft spot in the zone. So I think it's going to be a lot of brackets. It's going to be a lot of, having somebody underneath and then somebody over the top, kind of like what we saw with Tyreek Hill when the Eagles played the Dolphins. It's funny. They're two very different players, but the answers can sometimes be the same, when a guy's just that dynamic. So, I think that the bracket coverages, I am curious. I think they're going to try and throw a lot of things at him. I don't think it's going to be as simple as, oh, well, Eli Ricks is on him or Bradley Roby's on him. I'm curious to see if James Bradbury lines up against him sometimes. In training camp, James Bradbury spent a lot of time in the slot. And I remember thinking that feels like, the type of answer for when you play a premier tight end against a team that doesn't have as good receivers. Now, the James Bradbury slot experiment didn't go great. They didn't love him in that spot. They had to find other answers. So I'm curious to see if that's still on the menu for this team or if they've completely scratched it off. I think if you were going to break it out, this is the game you'd break it out. Obviously it's a big game. And it's a type of matchup that I think makes a lot of sense for it.
That's a good question, EJ. Maybe we'll see exactly what happens. We've talked about the offense and kind of their, I don't know about if regression is the right word, but perhaps becoming a little bit more one-dimensional, as you said. Let's talk about the Kansas City defense and how they've improved this season. Last year, they were number 16 in points allowed, and they were especially susceptible in the passing game. They were last in the league in passing touchdowns against. This year, it seems like they've tightened up quite a bit just across the board. They're the second-ranked defense in points, and they've tightened up quite a bit in the passing game. They're number 4 in yards and number 19 in touchdowns. If you look right now at the Eagles offense, I think steadily as the season has gone on, they have come together a bit more and improved. Jalen Hurts is really playing his best football of the season right now as a passer, even though he is a little bit limited right now as a runner, dealing with that knee injury. So with Dallas Goedert out, and knowing as well as Hurts is playing right now, how can he and this offense try to foil this improved Kansas City Chiefs defense?
Yeah, the Chiefs secondary is just like coming along. I feel like there are a lot of young players in that secondary. Trent McDuffie was a guy who I really liked when he's coming out in the draft. He's playing well in the nickel position. So it's like, I think for them every week the Eagles are gonna like their receiver matchups on the outside. And honestly, like, what do they need to do? They just need to keep doing what they've been doing. I think maybe a little bit more diverse passing attack that's not just going right through AJ Brown. But I do think that they're going to have favorable matchups on the outside most weeks. And I think that, what we've seen from Jalen Hurts in the last few games has been remarkable. The fact that his running ability has been limited. I think he feels better now, based off of what we heard from him earlier this week. It seems like the bye week could not have come at a better time, to use his words. He's not wearing the knee brace anymore. I've been watching him jog around at practice. It seems like he's a little bit less impeded. It's hard to really tell when he's jogging across the practice field. But anyway, I do think that it's really just going to be about keeping business as usual. Well, they need to be able to run the ball a little bit better. I imagine so. There are going to be times against a team like the Chiefs where you need to be able to, I wouldn't talk about ball control when it comes to running. I don't think you can really beat this Chiefs team by trying to just have 15 play drives and lower, like, keep the score low. Like, that's not, like, against a team like this, you need points more than anything. Oh, we got some fireworks going on behind us. That's pretty cool. But yeah, I think you need points against this team more than anything. But I think it's also important that they stay ahead of the chain. So if they can get the run game going on early downs, I think that's going to be big for them. But really, it just comes down to Jalen Hurts playing the way that we know he can play, the way he played in the Super Bowl last year, and the way he's played in the last few games.
Let's transition into, as we mentioned earlier, my favorite segment of our show, the fan zone. We've got a comment here, the best zone. Yes, well, we should rename it to the best zone. We've got a comment from Skip Dog. It's good to see you, our good friend there. I know we've had some comments from you in the past. We have to make Mahomes uncomfortable by blitzing. So, EJ, you already touched on this a little bit, the dangers, the risks that you take when you do try to blitz against a quarterback as talented as Patrick Mahomes, as intelligent as he is. Is there ever a scenario that you think that the Eagles should? How do you kind of go about trying to take that risk and see
like some contextual stuff that you maybe could try? And I think honestly, like, sim pressures is like a fun way that you can send 4 guys, but be a little bit creative, where you drop a defensive end into coverage and you blitz a linebacker. I mean, Nicholas Morrow has been a pretty good blitzer at times this season. So listen, I'm sure that there will be some blitzes, and I think that a timely blitz is always good, but we also saw the downsides of that in the Super Bowl, where Jonathan Gannon calls a 0 blitz and the Chiefs score a touchdown because they Patrick Mahomes read it and was ready for it. So definitely risky business. I think that in high leverage situations, I think it would make a lot more sense to drop 8 into coverage or drop 7 into coverage and rush just your line, and just make sure that you're not making it too easy, I would say. So I definitely think that against the elite quarterbacks, blitzing usually has a bad track record. And if you look at like Patrick Mahomes' stats, like, he is pressured so infrequently, and he does not take sacks. He's one of the fewest sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. So definitely, again, whenever you play a quarterback this good, you're going to need to be able to generate pressure without setting a lot of extra rushers.
You mentioned Nicholas Morrow, and in particular, that game against the Washington Commanders in Week 4 was when he had 3 sacks. So we'll be keeping an eye on him today to see what decides to do as far as blitzing Mahomes, and if Morrow gets involved at all in that. Thank you so much, Skip Dog, for your question. Let's take a question now from Holly Cat. We've got cats and dogs asking us questions.
I was hoping you would pick up on that. Yeah.
Oh, you know me, EJ. I'm very perceptive. Holly Cat says that the Eagles need to lean heavily into the run game and control the time of possession to assist the defense. We haven't really seen as dynamic of an Eagles run game as compared to the first 4 weeks of the season, when DeAndre Swift was really efficient running the ball. Over the last 5 games or so, it just really hasn't been the same. And it's easy to point out, Cam Jurgens has been out for the same amount of time that the Eagles run game really hasn't been getting going. But is it just him? Is there more to it than just missing a player like Jurgens?
Yeah, I think that you can't overstate the impact that Jalen Hurts' knee injury has had on the run game. I think that the Eagles talk a lot about +1 in the run game with Jalen Hurts, and I think it's hard to always conceptualize what that is. But I mean, it matters. Teams have to play the Eagles run game differently because of the fact that Jalen Hurts can pull the ball and take it the other way. And when you don't have that, you don't see a lot of teams around the league who have really, really good running games that do it almost exclusively out of shotgun the way the Eagles do. I mean, the Eagles are never under center. So, and there's reasons for that. It's easy to figure out which direction the run's going to go if you're in shotgun, because the running back has to pick a side. And when the Eagles are in pistol, which is okay, now you put the running back behind the quarterback, and it's you don't know which direction it's going to go. But the Eagles almost exclusively run out of that formation. So now teams can key in on the run. So it's just tricky to have a good running offense when you are in the shotgun that way without a mobile quarterback. And Jalen Hurts hasn't really been a threat with his legs the last few weeks. So I think that's a big part of it. Again, we mentioned that he's feeling better. I think that that's going to be important for a game like this if he is able to keep the defense honest with that. And I think it's just, it's also a little bit circumstantial, but I do think that Jurgens and Hurts, if both of those, obviously Jurgens back, if Hurts can run a little bit more, I do think you can run against this Chiefs defense. But again, I think it's important not to get too caught up in if the Eagles can dominate time of possession, then they can keep the Chiefs offense off the field. The thing about the Chiefs offense, it's funny. I was talking to Zach Cunningham about this earlier this week. Like, they're almost like the Golden State Warriors. It's like they can put up points really fast. So, like, even if you're trying to keep them off the field, they can score in 3 plays. They can score in 2 plays. Now, maybe they're a little less explosive this year, but they're still a really, really good offense. And I don't really buy their numbers as much. It's like, they're just like, they've been at the top of the NFL in terms of offensive production for so long that when they're like toward the bottom of like the top 10 or 11th in the league, it's like, oh, they're terrible now. It's like, no, they're still a really, really good group. So I think the Eagles are going to have to keep pace with them, and I think it's going to take explosive drives, explosive plays to do that.
All right, thank you, Holly Cat, for your comment. Let's transition to my second favorite segment of our show, the prediction segment. Crystal ball's out, EJ. What is your prediction for today's game?
So I went 27-24. I know I keep mentioning that like our predictions are also similar, but I think we see the game pretty similarly. I think that our colleague Jeff McClain also sees the game. I think we're 1 point off this time, so we got to work on that. I got to figure that out. But I do. I think the Eagles are good enough to win this game. This is really the 2 best teams in the NFL playing against each other in primetime. It's a huge matchup. So I'm definitely not saying that they can't win the game, but honestly, I feel like the Eagles are almost due for a loss a little bit. They've been outperforming their turnover differential, kind of playing in a lot of 1-score games. And I think that usually comes back to bite teams. So against a team that's good, the margin for error is so small. I think that, I could definitely see the Chiefs winning because of those factors. So, I think the weather might keep the score down a little bit. Maybe my live pick would be more like 24-21, but I think I'm still going to stick. I'm still sticking with my 27-24. I feel good about that. So, I think the Chiefs are going to, there's so many factors to this too. It's like Andy Reid after the bye week. It's just like, I feel like there's a lot of things here going the Chiefs' way. So, I went with the Chiefs 27-24.
I picked a similar score, but a little bit higher scoring, 30-25 Chiefs. I feel similarly to you, EJ and Jeff, who also made his prediction. And Josh was the only one among our quartet to pick the Eagles in this game. I agree with you that certainly it is a possibility that the Eagles could win this game, but I think you look on paper and this is probably the first game of the season that it seems like the Eagles are outmatched, at least on paper, in certain key positions. And we talked a lot about Travis Kelce being someone that is going to be important for the Eagles to figure out a solution for it, but we just really haven't seen that yet this season. So perhaps today with Bradley Roby coming back, maybe Kevin Byard will start to get his legs underneath of him. We haven't seen a whole lot from him. He hasn't really stood out for good reasons yet this season. So we'll see exactly what they decide to do there in trying to address him. But I think that could be a huge difference maker. And of course, Andy Reid, it's tough to pick against him. Nick Sirianni also quite the coach as well. But it just seems like that they've got the edge, at least not only from a personnel perspective, but also from a coaching perspective as well. All right, let's transition now to our player picks. We've been talking about a bunch of different players. We will have our eyes on all of these players throughout the game. But EJ in particular, who will you be keying in on?
All right, so I wrote one down, but I'm going to pivot here. I'm not going to go with a player. I'm going to go with a coach. I'm going to go with Sean Desai. I think that I just want to make sure we get to him at some point. His track record against Eric Bieniemy this season has not been good, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that because I'm sure that we're talking about Andy Reid, the bye week master. I'm sure he spent some of that bye week watching what the Commanders did against this Eagles defense and going, that's pretty good. That's pretty intriguing. So I think this is going to be a big test for them. They're coming off of the bye week and they're going to need to have answers for things like bunch sets and things like pre-snap identification. These are part of the reasons that the Commanders were able to have so much success against them, being able to tell what they were in, either man or zone before the snap, being able to put them in bunch sets and make their, complicate their rules and get open receivers. I think that that's going to be huge for them. The middle of the field defense against Travis Kelce, it's something we've talked about. It's going to be a huge deal. It's just like the Eagles' middle of the field defense has been bad all year, and this is the exact type of player who can capitalize on that. So, I know I'm going a little bit outside the rules here, but I'm going to go with Sean Desai. I think this is going to be an interesting game to see kind of where he's at as we're going into a stretch where the Eagles are going to be playing a lot of really good teams, and it's this is kind of like a really good like litmus test going into the postseason.
You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go off the board on this show, EJ. I'm very disappointed in you. For what it's
We'll
worth,
talk about it.
EJ,
Yeah.
EJ was going to pick Devontae Smith for the 9th straight week.
I
Not to
just
throw you
couldn't
under
do
the
it.
bus.
I think he could have a big game for sure, but listen. I'm trying to make sure the show is expansive and that we hit on all the points we need to hit on. But yeah, give me Devontae Smith too.
All right.
If he has a big game, then I can still take credit for it. It's in the script, so I can screenshot that and put it out. So yeah, I'm still covered.
There are no rules here. You can pick 2 players or 2 coaches or a coach and a player. Truly, whatever makes your heart happy, EJ. We are here for you.
I appreciate
I'm
that.
going to stick to the script and I'm not going to go off the board. I am going to pick my player to watch, and I don't necessarily know if this is going to be I don't know if I have the confidence that this is going to be an impact player in today's game. However, I think I will be watching this player to see if he at least makes some improvement over his play as of late, and that is cornerback James Bradberry. We had a conversation over the last, actually, I guess we've had a couple conversations over the last couple of weeks, and a story that went up on Inquire.com today. You can check it out.
It was
about
an excellent
Bradberry.
story.
Oh, thank you so much, EJ. But
Yeah.
It was about Bradberry, and not just his holding penalty in the Super Bowl last year that was controversial, but also how he handled it and how he has just carried himself throughout his career into this season and being accountable for the way that he's played this year. He's admitted that he hasn't played up to his standard. He wants to play better, especially compared to the standard that he set in the 2022 season, his first with the Eagles. Just this past week alone against the Cowboys, he allowed 5 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. That said, we've also seen some flashes. He made a big fourth quarter stop on 4th down late in the game there to a big pass breakup to get the Cowboys off the field. So, there's been good and bad, but I think he's going to be a key player, not just in today's game, but going forward for the rest of the season. The secondary has a ways to go if they're going to be playing their best football by the end of the season and getting into the playoffs. So he will certainly be someone that I will have my eye on. All right.
Yeah, there were some great quotes. There were some great quotes in that story, but my favorite was Swagberry. That's a really good nickname. That's elite tier stuff there. So great reporting. You definitely want to check that story out if you guys are looking for some pregame reading.
Thank you, EJ. Yes, and if you're a fan of nicknames, yeah, you can go over and check that out. Jordan Davis certainly has a good one for James Bradberry. All right, let's kick it over to Devin Jackson, Inquire's web betting producer, to take a look at the odds for today's game.
Hey everyone, I'm Devin Jackson, a web betting producer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, here to give you some of the best bets ahead of tonight's Monday Night Football game between the Chiefs and Eagles, a rematch of Super Bowl 57. Entering the game, the Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites, a line that has stayed pretty much constant since the odds opened back in May. But what has changed over the course of the week is the game point total, which is set at 45.5. It opened the week at 48.5. And a big reason why is that betting unders for Monday Night Football games are 11-1 this season. And since 2019, they are 56-28-1 according to Action Labs. But enough about the game odds. We'll take a look at some of the best player props, one of the most bet things on NFL games this season. We'll start with Devontae Smith. He has had a slow season so far this season compared to his standards, but his over-under set for this game, receiving yards-wise, is set at 60.5 yards at FanDuel. I would take the over on this prop just because that a lot of the attention for tonight's game, especially Chiefs defensively, is going to be on A.J. Brown and containing what Jalen Hurts does outside of the pocket. So I think taking the over on his receiving yards is worth the play at FanDuel. Another prop to take a look at ahead of tonight's game is Patrick Mahomes' passing yards. Now, if you're the casual bettor out there, you would think taking the over on his passing yards seems like the smart play. It's prime time. He's playing a team that he had a lot of success against in the Super Bowl. But something to note is that Patrick Mahomes has thrown for under 284 yards in 6 of 9 games this season, which is why I would take the under on his 284 passing yards prop at FanDuel. I just think the Eagles are going to key in on what he does, especially outside of the pocket, and try to create as much pressure as possible while obviously keying of Kelce. I think parlaying him with Jalen Hurts to score and play, you combine those two odds and you get plus 273 at FanDuel. and they're going to be a big part of the offense tonight. Whether you have the Chiefs or Eagles winning, you would expect that Jalen Hurts and Travis Kelce will find the end zone at some point tonight. Now, look at some of the best or notable action and notable bets ahead of tonight's game at BetMGM. We'll start with the most bet player to score a touchdown, which is Travis Kelce, who I just talked about as one of the best bets to make in terms of player props. He's at minus 115 to score anytime touchdown at BetMGM. And then you look at Jalen Hurts as a betting underdog in his career. He is 3-8, has a 3-8 career record. 70% of the bets are on the Eagles to win outright tonight, despite them being a 2.5-point underdog. A few more betting props to take note of, one being involving both of the quarterbacks' rushing attempts. Patrick Mahomes over 4.5 rushing attempts is minus 105 at BetMGM. That's one of the most prop bets ahead of tonight's game. And then 99% of the betting money is on Jalen Hurts to have more than 8.5 rushing attempts tonight. He's had 10 or more rushing attempts in every single game this season. That's all we got for you on Philly Parlay. We'll send things back to Olivia and EJ at Gameday Central.
Thanks so much, Devin, for your insight, and thank all of you for tuning in to Inquire Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. The party here is over. However, we're going to continue to interact with all of you over on inquire.com/Eagles Gameday. Throughout the game, we are going to be posting and commenting in real time throughout the game from the press box. So we want to hear you and we want to see you there in a little bit.
Yeah, and remember to stay up to date on all of our Inquire sports coverage by subscribing to our Sports Daily newsletter. You'll see our most recent articles along with other Phillies, Sixers, and college sports coverage. A lot of the articles referenced throughout this segment will be over there.
You can also keep up with Philly's most seasoned beat reporter on Uncovering the Birds with Jeff McLean. A new episode dropped earlier this week, so you can listen to that wherever you get your podcasts or go to inquire.com/podcasts. That's all for today, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity.